The winding lane to Blackwood Manor was a study in neglect. Ancient flagstones swallowed by moss, hedgerows overgrown like forgotten guardians. Rain, a persistent drizzle since dawn, coated everything in a slick sheen, blurring the edges of the world. My Land Rover's tires crunched on the gravel drive, a jarring sound in the oppressive quiet. This was the kind of place that held its secrets close, its history etched into every gnarled oak and crumbling gargoyle. And now, a celebrated historian had apparently tumbled to his death here. The local detective, a man whose face was a roadmap of weary skepticism, met me at the main entrance. He gestured towards the grand Gothic edifice. Dr. Alistair Finch fell from the West Tower balcony. Looks like he slipped in the rain. Tragic. His voice was flat, laced with the certainty of a case already closed. I nodded, my gaze sweeping past him to the towering stone walls, the rain-streaked windows, the sheer drop from the West Tower. Tragic, indeed. I kept my voice neutral. Experience had taught me that the initial assessment was rarely the full story, especially when a man of Dr. Finch's stature was involved. My specialty wasn't just bones. It was the stories they told, the silent narratives of the forgotten and the wronged, whispered through soil, rust, and the subtle shift of a displaced object. Blackwood had been a pivotal site in colonial-era trade, its archives reputedly unparalleled. Dr. Finch had dedicated his life to excavating its past, both literally and figuratively. Now he was just another layer of its history. The detective led me to the foot of the West Tower. Body's still there. We secured the scene, but given the circumstances, we haven't touched much. Just a fall. The rain had eased to a fine mist, clinging to the air like a shroud. Below the tower, on a patch of uneven flagstones, lay Dr. Finch. His body was a crumpled silhouette against the gray stone, a macabre still life. A single tattered blanket had been draped over him, a futile gesture against the elements. The fall would have been considerable, easily fatal. I knelt, my kit bag thudding softly beside me. I began my methodical assessment, ignoring the detective's impatient shuffling. My eyes, trained to see patterns in chaos, absorbed every minute detail. The body's position was the first thing that snagged my attention. A fall from that height, onto this unforgiving surface, should have resulted in a more chaotic distribution of limbs, perhaps a rotational impact. But Dr. Finch lay almost too neatly, one arm tucked beneath him, the other splayed out, fingers curled as if grasping at something that wasn't there. I moved closer, my gloved hands hovering inches above the scene. The ground around him was disturbed, yes, consistent with a heavy impact. But the splash pattern of debris, tiny fragments of moss, grit, a few broken twigs seemed off, too concentrated in some areas, strangely absent in others. It was like a painting where a single brushstroke felt out of place. Then I saw it. It wasn't a piece of the manor, nor a natural element of the garden. I carefully extracted it with tweezers. It was a fragment of polished obsidian, no larger than my thumbnail, perfectly smooth on one side, rough and fractured on the other. Anachronistic. Blackwood Manor wasn't built on volcanic rock, nor was there any known collection of such artifacts here. This wasn't local. This was a foreign element, sharp and out of place, like a shard of night. My gaze drifted back to Doctor. I gently shifted the blanket, revealing the hem of his tweed jacket. There, clinging to the fabric, was a faint, almost invisible dust. It wasn't the gray-brown dust of old plaster or the green of dried moss. This was a finer, almost iridescent powder, a pale metallic sheen that caught the weak light. My mind raced, sifting through geological profiles, industrial residues, archaeological dig sites. Nothing in the immediate vicinity of Blackwood Manor could account for it. This was the second anachronism, a silent scream against the narrative of a simple accident. "Anything, Seth?" the detective asked, his voice cutting through my intense focus. "Just observations," I replied, carefully bagging the obsidian shard. I peeled back the blanket further, examining Dr. Finch's hands. His right hand was balled into a loose fist. I gently uncurled his fingers. Embedded deep beneath a fingernail, almost imperceptible, was another tiny speck. This one was even smaller, but undeniably the same pale metallic dust. And clinging to the inside of his palm, a single, impossibly fine strand of synthetic fiber. Not wool, not cotton, nothing organic. It was a material I'd seen before, but never in a setting like this. This wasn't a fall. This was an event. My eyes scanned the body again, then the immediate surroundings. My gaze snagged on a small, leather-bound notebook lying half-hidden under a nearby rhododendron bush, likely dislodged during the fall. It was open to a page filled with Dr. Finch's tight academic script. My eyes quickly skimmed the words. Dates, historical references, but then a phrase leaped out at me, underlined twice. Offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes. No context, just the stark, specific mention. The detective was already calling for the crime scene unit to process the body. He still saw an accident. The obsidian, the iridescent dust, the synthetic fiber, and now this cryptic note. They were threads, fine and almost invisible, weaving a pattern of something far more deliberate, far more dangerous. And I was the only one listening. The rain had eased to a fine mist, clinging to the air like a shroud. Finch. A single tattered blanket had been draped over him, a futile gesture against the elements, now heavy and sodden. I knelt, my knees protesting against the damp cold seeping through my trousers. The flagstones beneath Finch were ancient, uneven, slick with moisture. No deep impact crater, no obvious gouges. Just the still, broken form. I meticulously documented the position of the body, the angle of the limbs, the way his head rested at an unnatural tilt against a particularly weathered stone. The blanket, I noted, had been placed after the fall. It wasn't tangled in the impact. My eyes moved to the victim. Dr. Finch's face was obscured by shadow and the general disarray, but I could discern the pallor, the stillness. I checked the clothing first, the heavy tweed jacket, the wool trousers. There was minimal tearing, surprisingly little given the reported height of the fall. This immediately raised a flag. A fall from that height onto flagstones should have caused more extensive damage to the fabric, more abrasion. As I gently shifted his left arm to examine the sleeve, I felt it. Not a snap, but a peculiar, almost elastic resistance, followed by an unnerving give. The forearm, though seemingly intact at first glance, held a subtle, unnatural twist, a distortion just above the wrist. It wasn't a clean break, but something more insidious, a complex, almost rotational stress fracture that suggested a struggle, or perhaps a forced impact before the fall, rather than a simple vertical drop. I made a mental note. Potential microscopic bone fractures inconsistent with the reported fall trajectory. The sheer force required to inflict such a twist without shattering the bone entirely was significant, and it didn't align with the physics of a body simply tumbling from a height. Clinging to the rough tweed of his jacket collar, and particularly concentrated along the inside cuff of his right sleeve, was a fine, shimmering dust. It was an ochre hue, almost iridescent in the damp gray light, catching what little sun penetrated the mist. I carefully collected a sample with a sterile swab, my brow furrowing. This wasn't local soil, nor was it the fine grit from the ancient mortar of the tower. This was something else entirely. I brought the swab closer, examining the particles under the beam of my penlight. They possessed a unique crystalline structure, an almost metallic sheen. My mind raced through geological databases, through years of examining trace evidence from archaeological sites across the globe. This was a mineral dust, certainly, but a unique one. It reminded me of certain rare silicate compounds found in isolated pockets, often associated with very specific types of ancient pottery or geological formations in regions far from this damp English estate. A unique mineral dust not native to the manor or its immediate surroundings. "This wasn't a simple fall, Constable," I stated, my voice low but firm, my gaze still fixed on the shimmering dust. "These fractures, and this." I gestured to the sample. "This dust. It doesn't belong here. It tells a different story." The constable's expression tightened. "Foul play, then?" "At the very least, an incident preceding the fall that we're not being told about," I confirmed. The damage to his arm, the placement of the body, the lack of significant impact damage to his clothes. And this dust. It speaks of another location, another event. My internal alarm bells were ringing, a discordant symphony of suspicion. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was deliberate. I finished my preliminary on-site examination, carefully bagging more samples, taking photographs, and sketching the scene. While the local team prepared to transport Dr. Finch's remains to a secure examination facility, I turned my attention to the manor itself. I needed to understand Finch's last hours, his recent activities. "Did Dr. Finch have any appointments today, Constable?" I asked, as we walked towards the manor's main entrance. "Any visitors expected? Any recent legal dealings?" The constable scratched his chin. "He was a busy man, Seth. Always with his head in old books, but he did mention something about a scheduled consultation regarding a recent acquisition. Said it was sensitive, legal paperwork. I think he was due to meet with a representative from some law firm." "Did he say which one?" "Couldn't tell you offhand, but his study might have something. We've secured it, of course." That was my next step. Finch's study was a mausoleum of history, shelves groaning under the weight of ancient texts and artifact replicas. Amidst the scholarly clutter, I found a small, embossed business card tucked beneath a pile of correspondence on his desk. The lettering was stark, modern, a stark contrast to the room's ancient ambiance. Sterling and Thorne, International Legal Services. And beneath it, an address. My suspicions coalesced into a sharp point of focus. Within the hour, I was in a borrowed vehicle, driving away from the misty, ancient estate, heading towards the city. The sign on the polished brass plaque read, "Sterling and Thorne, International Legal Services." The interior was all cool chrome and minimalist design, a stark, almost clinical environment that felt miles away from the damp, history-laden manor. A receptionist, impeccably dressed, sat behind a frosted glass partition. "I'm here regarding Dr. Finch," I stated, presenting my credentials. "I believe he had an appointment or ongoing business with your firm." Her smile was practiced, polite, but her eyes held a flicker of something unreadable. "Doctor, yes. A valued client. However, he missed his scheduled consultation today." She paused, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "May I ask the nature of your inquiry?" "I'm investigating the circumstances surrounding his death," I replied, my voice deliberately even. "My preliminary findings suggest his demise was not accidental. I need access to any files pertaining to his recent acquisitions or any legal documents he was involved in." Her smile didn't waver, but a subtle tension tightened her shoulders. "I'm afraid I can't grant access without a warrant, sir. Client confidentiality, you understand?" She gestured vaguely towards a row of sleek, anonymous filing cabinets lining one wall. Near them, I noticed a series of industrial-sized shred bins, their contents clearly visible through the clear plastic. Reams of finely shredded paper, thick as snowdrifts. Further down, behind a reinforced door, were several large, gleaming, locked safes. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. This place reeked of secrets, and I had a feeling Dr. Finch's death was inextricably linked to them. Her smile didn't waver, but a subtle tension tightened her shoulders. "I'm afraid I can't grant access without a warrant, sir. Anomalies. Details that don't fit the narrative. I need to understand his recent work, his contacts, anything that might shed light on what he was truly investigating. The lawyer's eyes, a cool, unreadable gray, met mine. My instructions are explicit. Dr. Finch's affairs are private. His research, intellectual property. We are merely the custodians of his legal interests. Her hand rested lightly on a polished, dark wood desk near a heavy, brass-bound safe, its combination dial glinting under the recessed lighting. It felt like an invitation to a staring contest I wouldn't win. I knew when to retreat. Pushing further here would only solidify her defenses. Very well, I conceded, rising from the uncomfortable leather chair. My investigation continues. I trust you'll cooperate should a warrant materialize. She offered another polite, unyielding smile, and I turned, the click of my shoes on the marble floor echoing the hollow feeling of hitting a dead end. It was a report I'd been waiting for, a preliminary analysis of the minute mineral dust particles I'd meticulously collected from Finch's clothing. Dust that didn't belong to the estate. My thumb swiped the screen, pulling up the attached document. The Black Siltstone Formation. Remote, largely unmapped, and known for its unusual, almost pristine preservation of ancient earth layers. This wasn't a dead end. It was a compass needle swinging wildly to a new, unexpected north. I canceled my flight back to the mainland, rerouting my journey. Hours later, the asphalt ribbon of the main road dwindled to a pockmarked track, then to little more than a pair of faint ruts winding through parched scrubland. The rental car, a sturdy but unglamorous utility vehicle, bounced and groaned. The landscape grew starker, the air thick with dust that coated everything in a fine rust-colored film. Distant, jagged peaks, the color of bruised plums, rose against a pale, washed-out sky. This was the Black Siltstone Formation, and it felt like the edge of the known world. The GPS signal wavered, then died. I relied on the topographical maps I'd cross-referenced with satellite imagery, navigating by instinct and the subtle shifts in the terrain. Finally, through a haze of heat, I spotted it. A rudimentary camp, a scattering of canvas tents, and a single battered trailer nestled precariously on a rocky outcrop overlooking a newly exposed excavation site. This was it. Finch's unsanctioned dig. I parked the vehicle a discreet distance away, the engine ticking as it cooled. The silence was profound, broken only by the rasp of the wind. A figure emerged from one of the tents, a young woman, her face smudged with dirt, hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She looked tired, her movements weary, as if the weight of the sun and the isolation had pressed down on her for too long. This had to be Finch's estranged research assistant, the only other name I'd managed to link to this remote operation. As I approached, she squinted, shielding her eyes. His expression, initially wary, tightened into a mask of apprehension when he recognized me. Perhaps the official heir I carried. "You're Seth," he stated, his voice hoarse as if unused to conversation. "The investigator from the estate." It wasn't a question. "I am," I confirmed, stopping a few feet away. "I need to talk to you about Dr. Finch, about what he was doing out here." She hugged herself, despite the heat, her gaze darting to the excavation, then back to me. "There's nothing to talk about. Finch, he was obsessed, that's all." Obsessed with what? I pressed gently, my eyes taking in the skeletal remains of a makeshift workstation, littered with geological tools and a few tattered field notebooks. Said it was hidden here, deep in the siltstone. Her hands wrung together. He changed. After he started finding things, he became secretive. The calls. They came in unmarked vehicles, always at night. Men, enigmatic figures. They spoke in hushed tones, away from me. Finch would be different after they left. More agitated. More desperate. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, held a profound fear. He was getting close to something. Something they didn't want found. A knot tightened in my stomach. The lawyer's stonewalling, the mineral dust, the remote dig. And now, this. Finch wasn't just chasing a historical ghost. He was on the verge of uncovering a secret, a dangerous one, and others were clearly involved. I could feel the invisible threads of a conspiracy drawing taut around me. The air grew colder, despite the sun beating down on the winding road that led deeper into the estate's sprawling grounds. My thoughts, however, were colder still. A labyrinth of unanswered questions and unsettling connections. The lawyer's evasiveness, the mineral dust, the remote dig site. Finch wasn't just chasing a historical ghost. He was on the verge of uncovering a dangerous secret. Others were involved. That much was clear. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up to a roped-off section of the estate. A vast, open field bordered by ancient, gnarled oaks. This was it. The designated archaeological dig. The estate's main house, a grand, crumbling edifice of gray stone, loomed in the distance. A silent witness to centuries. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze, but it felt more like a formality than a true barrier. I stepped out, the dry earth beneath my boots crunching with each stride. No work crew, no other vehicles, just the echoes of Finch's ambition. I moved towards the most recently exposed trench, a section where the soil looked particularly disturbed. The ground here wasn't just excavated, it had been re-excavated. And recently. I knelt, running my gloved fingers over the edge of a freshly cut trench wall. The marks weren't from archaeological trowels. These were wider, deeper, consistent with shovels, perhaps even a small excavator used with haste. My gaze swept across the disturbed earth. A glint of something unnatural. I carefully brushed away the loose dirt. It was a fragment, no larger than my thumb, of what looked like pottery. My mind immediately went to the mineral dust, the traces of rare earth elements. This wasn't local. This wasn't even European. Anachronistic was an understatement. It was a screaming paradox. A vehicle approached, kicking up dust on the track. I straightened up, dropping the fragment into a sample bag. The local detective, a man with tired eyes and a perpetually worried frown, emerged from his patrol car. He looked harried, his gaze immediately going to me and then to the disturbed earth. "Still at it, Seth?" the detective asked, his voice strained. He didn't sound pleased. "We're wrapping things up here. Preliminary report is clear. Accidental fall, open and shut." "Open and shut, you say?" I held up the sample bag, the small fragment visible through the clear plastic. Because this, for instance, isn't exactly consistent with a typical British archaeological find, or, for that matter, with Finch's reported area of study. The detective sighed, running a hand over his thinning hair. "Look, I appreciate your thoroughness, Seth. I do. But we've got orders. The family wants this closed. Powerful people, you know, and there's pressure from the higher-ups. This estate, Finch's reputation, his financial arrangements." He paused, almost as an afterthought. He had some complex dealings, apparently. It wasn't just a throwaway comment. It connected to the stonewalling, the carefully curated narrative. So, a renowned historian working on a dig in his own backyard dies in an accidental fall, and you're not interested in evidence of recent illicit excavation or artifacts that defy the very history he was supposedly researching? My voice was sharper than I intended. This isn't an accident. Detective, this is a crime scene that's been tampered with, and someone is trying very hard to cover it up. He shifted his weight, avoiding my gaze. My hands are tied, Seth. The official conclusion stands. Unless you have something irrefutable, something that screams murder, we're done here. He gestured vaguely at the site. We'll secure it, of course, but the active investigation phase is over. I nodded slowly, the determination solidifying in my gut. Understood. I wouldn't waste my breath arguing. If they wouldn't investigate, I would. I had the fragment, Finch's notes, and a growing conviction that this was far from an accident. I'd returned to my forensic lab, a meticulously organized space filled with microscopes, chemical analysis equipment, and countless evidence lockers. I'd locked up, as always, double-checking the deadbolts, activating the alarm. But as I approached the main door, a sliver of light from the street lamp caught something amiss. The heavy steel door, usually flush with the frame, was slightly ajar. My hand instinctively went to the small, weighted tool I carried. I pushed the door open slowly, my eyes scanning the interior. Nothing seemed overtly disturbed. No overturned furniture, no shattered glass. I moved cautiously through the main analysis room, then to my office. The filing cabinets were closed. My microscope was untouched. The evidence lockers, each containing carefully cataloged samples, were all secured. But then I saw it. On my desk, where I had left a stack of preliminary reports on Finch's remains, a single file folder lay open. It was the one containing my initial observations on the mineral dust, the notes on the unusual soil composition, and a printout of the preliminary analysis of the strange residue found on Finch's clothing. Nothing was missing. No page torn out. Someone had been here. They hadn't wanted to steal anything. They wanted to see what I knew. And they wanted me to know that they knew I was closing in. My breath hitched. This wasn't just about a dead historian anymore. It was about me. The lingering scent of ozone and solvent hung in my makeshift lab. A familiar comfort as I hunched over the fragment. Under the powerful magnification of the stereo microscope, the ceramic shard from Finch's estate transformed into a landscape of minute imperfections and deliberate artistry. The previous evening had been a blur of meticulous preparation, isolating the piece, gathering my tools. Now the quiet hum of the equipment was the only sound breaking the silence, save for the rhythmic brush of the micro-abrasive tool against the surface. I started with the visible layers, the patina that suggested centuries of burial. My fingers, steady and precise, worked the specialized brushes, clearing away the superficial grime. On a separate screen, high-resolution scans revealed the internal structure. The preliminary X-ray fluorescence had already flagged anomalies in the elemental composition of the glaze, hints of pigments not quite right for the purported era. But XRF only told part of the story. The true tale lay in the execution. Hours bled into one another. I moved from spectrometry to electron microscopy, my concentration absolute. The pigment analysis solidified the initial suspicions. While the base clays were consistent with the region, certain trace elements in the coloration, particularly the vibrant blues and deep reds, hinted at synthetic compounds, or at least compounds processed with modern techniques far beyond the capabilities of the supposed ancient civilization. My brow furrowed. This was a sophisticated operation, not some amateur attempting a quick profit. Then came the tool marks. Under extreme magnification, the subtle striations left by shaping tools told their own story. Ancient potters used specific implements, leaving characteristic patterns. Here, however, I observed faint, almost imperceptible parallel lines. Too uniform, too precise. They suggested a level of mechanical consistency, a modern regularity, that simply did not exist in the historical period this fragment mimicked. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just old. This was expertly made to look old. The final confirmation came from the firing. The ceramic's vitrification, the degree to which it had fused, indicated a temperature range that, while achievable in antiquity, was remarkably consistent and evenly distributed throughout the fragment. Ancient kilns, for all their ingenuity, rarely achieved such thermal uniformity. This piece had been fired in a controlled environment, a modern kiln. I leaned back, rubbing my temples, the fluorescent glow of the lab reflecting in my eyes. The fragment wasn't merely anachronistic, it was an incredibly sophisticated forgery. He hadn't just been researching ancient artifacts, he'd been exposing a high-stakes forgery ring. The implications slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't about a historical curiosity. It was about deception on an industrial scale, valuable historical narratives being undermined by perfectly crafted lies. And Finch, the meticulous historian, had stumbled into the heart of it. The detective's dismissal of my findings echoed in my mind. They saw a fall, a tragic end. I saw a meticulously planned cover-up and a piece of pottery that screamed betrayal. Finch's notes, which I had pored over again and again, suddenly took on a new, urgent meaning. His obscure references to material inconsistencies and unusual provenance trails weren't just academic musings. They were breadcrumbs leading straight to this revelation. Finch had been onto something, and whatever it was, it had cost him his life. The estate felt different under the pre-dawn gloom, the air heavy with unspoken secrets. The room, still exactly as I had left it, seemed to watch me. I started my search methodically, focusing on the areas Finch would have kept his most sensitive work. I checked the obvious spots first, behind books, under desk drawers, inside wall panels. Nothing. My eyes scanned the heavy mahogany desk. Finch was a creature of habit, organized to a fault. Yet I recalled a fleeting observation from my initial survey. A slight, almost imperceptible misalignment in the grain of one of the desk's side panels near the floor. It had seemed like a minor manufacturing flaw at the time, easily dismissed. Now I saw it through a different lens. I knelt, running my fingers along the seam. I pressed gently, then harder, along the edge. With a soft click, a narrow panel, no wider than my hand, sprang inward. Inside, nestled snugly, were two items: a slim, encrypted external drive and a folded piece of aged parchment. The parchment was thick, brittle, covered in faded ink and strange angular symbols I didn't recognize. It was a map, but unlike any geographical chart I had ever seen. I carefully extracted the items. The drive felt solid, heavy with the weight of hidden information. The map, however, was what truly held my attention. It was old, certainly, but its context was entirely obscure. Was it a real map? A diagram? A code? The colleague had mentioned Finch's sudden interest in shell corporations and the complex legal structures that shielded them. The words resonated now, echoing the hidden compartment's contents. Finch wasn't just tracking artifacts. He was tracking the money, the infrastructure that financed the deception. The encrypted drive, the coded map. They weren't just clues to the forgery itself, but to the entire network behind it. This wasn't merely a research project gone awry. It was an investigation into a global criminal enterprise. And now, I was standing in the middle of it. The air in the study, once merely still, now felt charged with a palpable, dangerous energy. The midpoint reversal was complete. I was no longer an observer. I was a participant, holding the threads of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond the quiet confines of this estate. The previous analysis had confirmed its age, far older than any conventional records suggested for its alleged provenance. But it was the embedded, almost imperceptible fibrous material that had truly piqued my interest. It wasn't organic, not silk or cotton, but something synthetic, a modern polymer woven into the ancient clay. An anachronism, a deliberate signature I now understood. It wasn't just a forgery. It was a marker. I'd found them tucked into a cleverly disguised compartment beneath a loose floorboard in Finch's study, a space so well concealed it had almost escaped my initial sweep. The compartment itself was an event, a clear signal that Finch had secrets he couldn't trust to anyone else. The USB drive, however, was a different beast altogether. A digital lockbox. I pushed the ceramic fragment aside, the polymer's secret now understood, and turned my full attention to the journal. My fingers traced the intricate, almost calligraphic script. Finch had a passion for historical ciphers, and this looked like one of his more elaborate creations. I spent the next few hours immersed in the dance of decryption, cross-referencing known historical codes, searching for patterns, for a key. My mind, trained to see order in chaos, began to pick apart the layers. The journal entries, once jumbled nonsense, slowly coalesced into a fragmented narrative. They spoke not of archaeological digs or academic theories, but of transactions, of movements, of a grand design. The map, initially a jumble of lines and symbols, began to yield its secrets as I applied the same principles. It wasn't a geographical map in the conventional sense, but a schematic, a network of nodes and pathways. Some nodes were clearly geographical, marked with faint, almost erased place names, obscure ports, remote estates, even a few coordinates that pointed to desolate stretches of ocean. Other symbols, however, remained stubbornly opaque, hinting at something more abstract, perhaps organizational structures or code words. The real challenge lay with the USB drive. Finch had been meticulous, and the encryption was formidable. It took a specialized software suite running on a dedicated, isolated server to even begin to crack it. Hours bled into one another, the hum of the processors a monotonous backdrop to my escalating tension. The screen glowed with lines of code, a digital current against the analog world of the journal. I fed it algorithms, attacked it with brute force, then with more elegant pattern-based logic, knowing that time was a luxury I probably didn't have. Finally, with a soft chime from the server, the drive yielded. A flood of files cascaded onto my secure network. Ledgers, correspondences, scanned documents, and image files. This was the reveal. This was the raw data of Finch's hidden life. My fingers flew across the keyboard, opening files, searching for keywords. The names that emerged from the digital deluge were not those of petty thieves or isolated forgers. They were figures of immense wealth and influence, collectors whose names graced philanthropic boards and museum wings. The files detailed an intricate web, a vast network of individuals and shadowy historical societies operating under various innocuous fronts. The correspondences spoke in veiled terms, but the meaning was clear. They were not merely acquiring artifacts. They were controlling them, manipulating their provenance, sometimes even destroying evidence that contradicted their desired narratives. Then I found the terms, repeatedly. The legacy. Not a collection of objects, but a conceptual inheritance, a hidden history they were sworn to protect and propagate. And the keepers. The individuals, the inner circle, dedicated to this task. It wasn't just about money, though vast sums moved through their accounts. It was about power, the power to shape the past, to redefine historical truths. The ceramic shard, with its anachronistic polymer, suddenly made chilling sense. It was a signature, a boast, a way for the keepers to mark their controlled narratives, their legitimate forgeries, while they hoarded the genuine articles. My eyes landed on a recurring entry in one of the financial ledgers, routing via Trident Legal Inc., followed by a specific address. Most significant transfers of funds and, more disturbingly, with the movement of what were cryptically referred to as assets. This wasn't just a financial clearinghouse. It was a nexus, a central vault, a place where the physical and financial components of the legacy converged. The image of those shred bins and locked safes painted a vivid picture in my mind, a place designed for both meticulous security and ruthless obliteration of evidence. This conspiracy extended far beyond simple forgery. Finch hadn't just stumbled upon a ring of artifact traffickers. He had uncovered a cabal intent on rewriting history itself, controlling not just priceless, genuine artifacts, but the very narratives that defined them. I was no longer just a forensic anthropologist examining bones. I was a threat to the keepers and their carefully constructed legacy. The hum of the server, once a comfort, now felt like a buzzing alarm, a warning of the unseen eyes that might already be watching. The anachronistic signature was undeniable, but it was the embedded particulate matter that truly held my attention. I spent the next several hours running microspectroscopy tests, cross-referencing databases, a meticulous dance of science and intuition. The results, when they finally coalesced, were startling. The mineral was a form of native tellurium, rare and geologically specific, found only in a handful of locations globally. One particular cluster of deposits immediately flagged my internal map. A remote, almost inaccessible region known more for its reclusive estates than its geological wonders. This wasn't just a random contaminant. It was a fingerprint, a geographic marker left behind. Finch's old research papers, a stack I'd pulled from his study, had been a secondary focus. I remembered a particular footnote, an obscure collaboration from decades past with a now-retired curator, a figure known for both brilliant scholarship and an almost conspiratorial distrust of mainstream archaeology. The curator's name, Professor Alara Vance, resurfaced in my thoughts. She'd been Finch's mentor, a woman of formidable intellect who had, according to academic whispers, fallen out of favor for her unconventional theories. If anyone could shed light on Finch's later, more dangerous pursuits, it would be her. I found her address in an antiquated university directory, tucked away in a quiet, tree-lined street far from the city's bustle. The house was a monument to a life lived among books. Every surface, every available inch, was laden with tomes, journals, and ancient maps. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and dried herbs. The curator, a woman whose eyes still held a sharp, inquisitive spark despite the deep lines etched around them, opened the door with a wary expression. His gaze, surprisingly direct, seemed to weigh my intentions. "Seth," he said, his voice raspy, "I remember your work on the Aegean bronzes. What brings a forensic anthropologist to my quiet retirement?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. It's about Dr. Finch, and something I found at his estate. I held up a sealed evidence bag, allowing her a glimpse of the ceramic shard and the accompanying report on the tellurium dust. "This mineral, Professor, it's unique. And it was on him, and on this artifact." She peered at the bag, her brow furrowing. Her gaze sharpened as she read the tellurium analysis. A flicker of something, fear, recognition, crossed her features before she masked it. She led me to a small, cluttered study, offering a cup of strong, bitter tea. "Finch was a brilliant man," she began, stirring her own tea slowly. "But he was always drawn to the edges, to the narratives that didn't fit." She paused, her eyes scanning the spines of the books surrounding us. He spoke of a society. He called them the Keepers. My heart gave a jolt. The Keepers? Not a myth, Seth. Not entirely. They are an organization, ancient and deeply entrenched, dedicated to the control of archaeological knowledge. Not for preservation, but for power. Political, financial. They dictate what is found, what is displayed, and more importantly, what remains hidden. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. They manipulate history itself. Finch was investigating them? I pressed, the tellurium dust report suddenly feeling heavier in my hand. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. He believed they were behind the suppression of certain findings, particularly those that challenged established historical timelines, or revealed inconvenient truths about powerful lineages. He was convinced they had a network of private estates, remote and unassuming, where they curated their illicit finds. Places far from the prying eyes of legitimate institutions. "And the tellurium?" I asked, pushing the report across the table. Could this mineral dust be a signature? A trace from one of these curation sites? She picked up the report, her fingers tracing the words. Tellurium. Yes. Well, it's a place that wouldn't normally draw attention. Finch was getting too close. He spoke of how they legitimized their finds, moving them through shell corporations, using complex financial structures. Finch hadn't just stumbled upon a conspiracy. He'd been on the verge of exposing its very infrastructure, from the hidden archives to the financial conduits that fueled it. He was trying to expose them. Be careful, Seth. You are treading on very dangerous ground. Her eyes, once sharp, now held a deep, profound weariness. The weight of her words, the palpable fear radiating from her, was a heavy cloak. I understood then that I wasn't just investigating a murder. I was peeling back layers of a history deliberately buried, protected by those who would kill to keep their secrets. The remote private estate, the source of the tellurium, now stood out like a beacon in my mind's eye, a destination that promised answers, and perhaps, even greater peril. The curator's words had echoed in the chilled air of the archives, a chilling confirmation of the keepers and their methods. But first, Elias Thorne. His remote estate, a sprawling testament to old money and carefully curated privacy, was the next piece of the puzzle. I had to see it for myself, had to understand the scale of his operation. The drive out was long, the paved roads giving way to gravel, then eventually to a barely maintained track that wound through dense, ancient woods. My rental car, an unassuming sedan, handled the terrain with a surprising lack of complaint. Dusk was settling, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges as I finally approached the estate's perimeter. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a declaration. I parked a quarter-mile back, deep in the tree line, and continued on foot. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. My gear was minimal. A small pack containing a specialized lock-picking kit, a compact bore scope, a high-resolution camera, and a multi-tool. Years of sifting through ancient burial sites and meticulously reconstructing fragments had honed my patience and my eye for detail. These skills, usually applied to the dead, would now serve me among the living and the very much alive threat they represented. The main gates were formidable, but I had no intention of using them. I'd spent the last few hours studying satellite imagery and topographic maps. There was a section of the wall, less visible from the main house, where the ground sloped sharply, partially obscuring the lower sensors. It was a calculated risk. A quick scan with my thermal imager confirmed the general layout of the security grid. The lasers were infrared, the motion sensors pressure sensitive. Reaching my chosen point, I began my ascent. The stone was rough, providing purchase, and I moved with the silent economy of a seasoned climber. My fingers found purchase in the ancient mortar, my body pressing close to the cold stone. At the top, a series of quick, precise movements allowed me to bypass the external sensor array. I dropped silently into the manicured grounds, the soft grass cushioning my landing. My target, however, was not the main residence. My research suggested a separate, less ostentatious building to the rear, ostensibly a large workshop or garage. The security here was less overt but no less pervasive. Subtle pressure plates, hidden cameras disguised as ornamental lighting. I navigated them with a practiced ease, my mind mapping the invisible web. The workshop building was a modern addition, starkly functional compared to the main house's ornate facade. It was windowless, a fortress of steel and reinforced concrete. Entry was through a heavy, electronically secured door. My lockpicking kit, usually reserved for delicate archaeological cases, felt crude in this context, but effective. The tumblers clicked, a soft metallic whisper in the oppressive silence, and the heavy door swung inward. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the scent of solvents, resins, and something metallic. The space was immense, bathed in the cool, clinical glow of overhead LED panels. This was no ordinary workshop. This was a state-of-the-art forgery operation. Tables were laden with specialized tools, microscopes with digital displays, precision engraving machines, chemical baths, and sophisticated ovens. One piece, still in a vise, bore a glaze that, under my pocket magnifier, showed the same minute, anachronistic inclusions I'd found on the shard at the historian's estate. The tellurium dust. It was here, residue clinging to the bench, shimmering faintly under the harsh lights. The scale of the deception was breathtaking. My gaze swept the room, searching for something more. Behind a false wall, cleverly disguised as a storage unit, I found it. A heavy, reinforced steel door, clearly a vault. My pulse quickened. This was it. The main prize. The lock was a complex biometric and keypad system. I worked quickly, using my borescope to peer into the inner workings, my fingers dancing across the keypad, trying combinations based on Thorne's known birth date and other public information. The vault was a treasure trove, not of forgeries, but of genuine, priceless artifacts. Shelves lined the walls, laden with items that made my breath catch in my throat. Ancient scrolls, their papyrus fragile and yellowed, gold death masks, their eyes staring blankly into the sterile air, intricately carved jade figures, and, most damning of all, a collection of cuneiform tablets, still caked with the soil of the Near East, clearly ripped from their archaeological context. These were not collector's pieces. These were stolen heritage, plundered from sites I knew intimately. The sheer audacity, the brazen theft, burned in my gut. I began photographing everything, my camera's silent shutter clicking, capturing the evidence. Each image was a nail in Thorne's coffin, and perhaps the keeper's too. I focused on specific identifiers, unique markings, provenance tags that had been clumsily removed but left faint traces. It was a frequency I recognized. An ultrasonic motion sensor activated. A low, guttural growl followed, emanating from somewhere deep within the building. Security systems. Thorne's advanced systems had finally detected me. I was compromised. The vault door began to slide shut, slowly, inexorably. I lunged, throwing my body through the closing gap, scraping my shoulder against the heavy steel. The growl intensified, closer now, and I heard the unmistakable click of a bolt-action rifle being chambered. I was no longer alone in the workshop. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. My escape route was the same as my entry, back through the workshop, out the door, and over the wall. I moved, not running wildly, but with a focused urgency. A beam of light cut through the gloom, followed by a sharp crack that splintered the concrete wall beside me. A warning shot. Or an attempt to incapacitate. I sprinted for the door, my heart a hammer against my ribs, the images of the stolen artifacts burning in my mind. The heavy door was still ajar. My path back to the wall was now a desperate dash. The carefully bypassed sensors likely reactivated. The entire estate a cage closing in. I could hear the thud of heavy boots on the grass, the sharp barks of what sounded like attack dogs. This was no longer an investigation. It was a desperate fight for survival. The hum of the laminar flow hood was the only constant companion in my lab, a sterile whisper against the late hour. My eyes, gritty from hours spent hunched over microscopes and high-resolution monitors, scanned the assembled data. But first, I needed to solidify the ground beneath my feet, to forge an unassailable link between Thorne and Finch's demise. The sprawling digital map of Thorne's estate glowed on the main screen, annotated with red circles and yellow flags. Each mark represented a point of interest, a microscopic anomaly I had painstakingly cataloged. The initial assessment of Finch's fall had been a clumsy lie, now unraveling under the weight of meticulous detail. I zoomed in on the landing where Finch's body had been found. Beneath my enhanced view, I could see minute traces of a specific high-alkaline cleaning agent, inconsistent with the estate's usual maintenance records. It was a detail I'd cross-referenced with the residue found on Finch's worn leather shoes. Not from the fall, but from before it. On a separate monitor, macro photographs of Thorne's personal study rotated in a slow loop. I paused on an image of a heavy, ornate desk. Beside it, a cluster of what appeared to be wood fibers. My analysis had confirmed them as ancient oak, consistent with the specific species used in a display cabinet Finch had been examining, not the desk itself. A struggle, a desperate grab, a transfer of material. The silent narrative began to coalesce. My fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up the trace evidence reports. The synthetic polymer fiber, a vibrant, almost iridescent blue, found adhering to Finch's tweed jacket. It wasn't from his clothing, nor from the estate's furnishings. The connection was undeniable. Someone had been cleaning something thoroughly, rapidly, and recently. Then there were the bone fragments. Not from Finch, but from the historical remains I'd been brought in to analyze. Minuscule splinters, barely visible to the naked eye, had been lodged in the fabric of Finch's trousers, near the cuff. My initial thought had been contamination from his work, but the specific location and the fact that they were embedded, not merely resting, suggested a more violent interaction. They were ancient, yes, but freshly dislodged, carrying microscopic residues of a modern adhesive. The pieces were no longer disparate. Thorne's motive, his methods, the meticulous cover-up. Finch had uncovered something specific, something that jeopardized not just Thorne. It was where the paper trail, the true extent of the conspiracy, would be buried. My evidence, however, focused on the immediate crime, the brutal act that had brought me here. My gaze drifted to the stack of reports and photographic plates, each meticulously labeled, cross-referenced, and secured. The sheer weight of it pressed down on me. Presenting this to a police force I suspected was already compromised, perhaps even infiltrated, felt like stepping into a lion's den. The stakes were no longer just about justice for Finch. They were about my own survival. If the keepers had the reach the curator implied, then exposing Thorne meant exposing them, and that made me a target. A shiver, not from the lab's controlled temperature, ran down my spine. I had enough. More than enough. The time for quiet investigation was over. It was time to push. I began to compile the final presentation, my movements precise, deliberate. The first rays of dawn were beginning to streak the horizon outside, painting the sky in a bruised purple. The quiet hum of the hood continued, a steady rhythm against the rising tide of my resolve. The pieces were no longer disparate. Thorne's motive, his methods, the meticulous cover-up. Finch had uncovered something specific, something that jeopardized not just Thorne, but the entire network of the keepers. The cleaning agent, the transferred wood fibers. They all pointed to a carefully staged scene, a desperate attempt to bury a truth too dangerous to surface. My mind raced, replaying every detail of Finch's life, his habits, his paranoia. He was a historian, a meticulous record keeper, but he wasn't foolish. He wouldn't have kept the most damning evidence at the estate, not with Thorne so close. There had to be a contingency, a fail-safe, something off-site. I remembered a casual comment Finch had made months ago about setting up a digital will and safeguarding his more sensitive research notes. He'd mentioned a particular firm known for its discretion, a place where privacy was paramount. It was the kind of place where inconvenient truths went to die, or, if you were careful, to be preserved. Finch wouldn't have just found something. He would have secured it. I bypassed the usual channels. The local constabulary, while well-meaning, moved too slowly, too deliberately for the urgency I now felt. Thorne wasn't just a killer. He was a gatekeeper of secrets. He'd be moving, covering tracks, anticipating my next move. I had to get there first, or at least before he finished his work. A frantic call to a contact, a former colleague from my academic days who now specialized in digital forensics and knew the labyrinthine world of corporate entities, provided the lead I needed. Finch had indeed established an account, a secure deposit, under an obscure shell corporation. The location: a nondescript building on a forgotten side street, a concrete monolith in a financial district that hummed with a different kind of power. The air inside the offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes was cool, filtered, and hushed. The lobby, all polished stone and frosted glass, felt less like an office and more like a mausoleum for corporate secrets. A receptionist, impeccably dressed, gave me a polite, practiced smile when I presented my credentials and Finch's access code. My heart hammered an erratic rhythm against my ribs. I was walking into the lion's den, or perhaps the antechamber to it. Mr. Finch's holdings are in Vault Level B, the receptionist stated, her voice devoid of inflection. A representative will escort you. The representative, a lean man with eyes that scanned everything and revealed nothing, led me down a corridor lined with heavy, reinforced doors. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft click of our shoes on the tiled floor. We descended 2 levels in a cramped, silent elevator. The deeper we went, the more the air seemed to thicken, pressing in. As we approached Vault Level B, a faint, rhythmic hum became audible. It was a mechanical drone, insistent and unsettling. The representative's expression remained neutral, but I felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't the silence I had anticipated. He opened the heavy steel door to the vault area. The hum intensified, revealing itself as the hungry grind of industrial shredders. Not one, but several roaring through paper. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and freshly shredded documents. Thorn was here, or his people were. They were already at work, systematically erasing Finch's final testament. "Stop," I commanded, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. One held a lever, poised to feed another stack into the waiting maw of a machine. The other, broader, turned slowly, his face obscured by the low light and a baseball cap. But I knew. Thorn stepped forward, his silhouette filling the space between 2 towering stacks of locked safes. His expression was a predatory smirk. Always the tenacious one, just like Finch. The representative, realizing the situation had veered sharply from protocol, took a hesitant step back, his eyes darting between me and Thorn. "Sir, I must insist." "You must insist on nothing." Thorn cut him off, his voice laced with an icy menace that made the man flinch. "My associates and I are merely tidying up some overdue files." He gestured vaguely at the shredders. Finch was rather messy. You see, the accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Because he found something here. Something you're trying to destroy. Thorn chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "A tragic accident, Seth." They held a glint of the ruthlessness I had only suspected. But yes, he did find something. Something about our legacy. Something that threatened to expose the keepers and our centuries of work. He stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over the remaining untouched safes. He was clever, I'll grant him that. Hid his little revelation in a way that would only be triggered by his death. A digital dead man's switch, linked to a physical key. But even the cleverest men leave trails. He held up a small, ornate silver key, glinting in the dim light. This led us right to his final secret. My eyes locked onto the key, then to the single, old-fashioned safe at the far end of the vault, different from the modern, digital ones. It was a relic, probably left by a previous generation of clients, but it fit Finch's eccentricities perfectly. Thorn had found the key. He was moments away from destroying the very truth I sought. "What did he find, Thorn?" I pressed, trying to buy time, to understand the full scope of his depravity. Thorn's smirk widened, revealing a flash of genuine malice. "Not an artifact, Seth. Something far more damaging. The truth about where the artifacts came from. The blood, the sacrifice, the systematic eradication of entire cultures to preserve our legacy. Finch found the ledger, the list of names, the true history of the Keepers. A history that would dismantle everything we've built, expose the foundations of our power." He took another step towards the old safe, the silver key poised. And now, it dies with him. Before he could insert the key, I lunged. It wasn't a calculated move, but an instinct, a desperate gamble. The broader henchman moved to intercept, but I ducked under his arm, my momentum carrying me towards Thorn. My shoulder connected with Thorn's side, sending him stumbling, the key flying from his grasp. It skittered across the concrete floor, coming to rest near one of the active shredders, dangerously close to its grinding teeth. "Get him!" Thorn roared, scrambling to regain his footing. The 2 operatives converged. I was trapped between the whirring shredders, the towering stacks of safes, and Thorn's enraged enforcers. My mind, usually focused on the quiet precision of bones and dirt, now frantically calculated angles, distances, and vulnerabilities. This wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was a battleground. And the truth, Finch's legacy, was hanging by a thread, just inches from oblivion. The key, a glinting sliver of brass, spun through the air, a chaotic arc against the sterile gray of the corridor. My lunge had been clumsy, fueled by desperation, but effective. Thorne staggered back, a grunt escaping his lips, his eyes wide with surprise and a flash of pure rage. The broader henchman, momentarily thrown by my unexpected move, lunged too late. His massive hand swiped empty air where I had been. My gaze locked onto the tumbling key. It bounced once, a soft metallic clink, and skittered across the polished floor towards a recessed fire extinguisher cabinet. Before Thorne could recover, before the henchman could pivot, I dropped to a knee, my fingers scrambling, snatching the cold metal. My palm closed around it, the sharp edges digging into my skin. Thorne roared, a sound of frustrated fury. He lunged, not at me, but at the henchman, shoving him forward. "Get him!" The henchman, a towering wall of muscle, moved with surprising speed, his shadow engulfing me. I rolled, tucking the key deeper into my fist, the adrenaline a bitter taste at the back of my throat. His boot landed where my head had been a second before, scuffing the floor with a harsh scrape. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself against the wall, my breath catching in my chest. This wasn't a laboratory, not a crime scene. This was a fight for survival, and I was outmatched. A sudden, sharp command echoed down the corridor, cutting through the tension. "Freeze! Police!" The voice was the detective's, unmistakable. Relief, potent and dizzying, washed over me, almost buckling my knees. Two figures, the detective and a colleague, rounded the corner, weapons drawn, their faces grim. The broader henchman hesitated, his movements slowing, his eyes darting between me, Thorne, and the newly arrived officers. Thorne, however, seemed to deflate, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining from him as quickly as it had ignited. "It's over, Thorne," the detective stated, his voice calm, authoritative. "Put your hands where I can see them." The subsequent minutes were a blur of commands, the clink of handcuffs, the heavy silence that followed the cessation of conflict. Thorne and his henchmen were secured. The detective moved towards me, his gaze assessing. "Seth, you all right?" I nodded, pushing myself upright, my hand still clutching the key. My shoulder ached where it had connected with Thorne, and a dull throb pulsed behind my eyes, but otherwise, I was intact. "I'm fine, I got the key." I held it up, a small, triumphant gesture. The detective's eyes narrowed on the key, then on the door Thorne had been attempting to open. Good. Let's see what he was so desperate to hide. The mandatory location for Thorne's final stand was an offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes, a place designed for opacity. We had moved swiftly once the immediate threat was neutralized. The office itself was nondescript, on the third floor of a modern, anonymous building overlooking a busy shipping lane. The door, now unlocked by the key I had snatched, revealed a compact, windowless room. The air inside was heavy, still. Dominating one wall was a formidable steel safe, its dial gleaming dully. Across from it, two industrial-grade shred bins overflowed with finely cut paper ribbons, a testament to Thorne's frantic attempts at destruction. "He almost got it all," I murmured, my gaze sweeping the room. The sheer volume of shredded material was daunting. "Almost," the detective agreed, his voice tight with anticipation. He gestured to the safe. "Let's start here." The key fit, turning with a satisfying click that echoed in the small room. The heavy door swung open, revealing a meticulously organized interior. Stacks of leather-bound ledgers, sealed envelopes, and a few small, velvet-lined boxes filled the shelves. My breath hitched. This was it, the reveal. I reached for a ledger, my fingers tracing the embossed title. "The Keepers, transaction log. Opening it, I saw columns of dates, coded names, and values, meticulously recorded. Another envelope contained photographs of artifacts. Some I recognized from the historian's collection, others entirely new to me, accompanied by provenance documents clearly fabricated and, damningly, shipping manifests detailing their illicit movement across continents. The colleague, meanwhile, had begun the painstaking process of sifting through the shredded documents. Even in their fragmented state, keywords leaped out: historian, anachronism, removal, asset protection. It was a puzzle, but the pieces were all here awaiting reassembly. The contents of that safe laid bare the entire intricate web. In the aftermath, the news broke like a dam. The recovery of the stolen artifacts, some of immense historical value, made headlines. The meticulous reassembly of the shredded documents, a monumental task undertaken by forensic document examiners, painted an undeniable picture of the keepers, their structure, their members, their motivations. The public exposure was swift and brutal. Academics, art dealers, even a few minor politicians were implicated. Justice, a slow and often frustrating process, was finally unfolding. The days that followed blurred into a haze of reports, interviews, and the gnawing exhaustion that comes after prolonged, intense pressure. I found myself back in my own quiet lab, the familiar scent of earth and preservation agents a strange comfort. The case was closed, the immediate threat gone, but the echoes lingered. The emotional and psychological toll was profound. I had started as an anthropologist, a man of science, dealing with bones and dust, seeking truth in the silent language of the past. This case had dragged me into the very messy, dangerous present, forcing me to confront human greed and cruelty head-on. The weight of what I'd uncovered, the vastness of the conspiracy, settled heavily on my shoulders. But with that weight came a different kind of clarity. The truth, painstakingly unearthed, had shattered a powerful illusion. It had brought down an empire built on lies and theft. My science, my meticulous attention to detail, had been the catalyst. It was a potent realization. I looked down at my hands, still bearing faint smudges of dust from the last artifact I'd examined. These hands, usually probing ancient remains, had snatched a key, had pushed back against a violent threat. The world of forensic investigation, I now understood, was far broader, far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The pursuit of justice through the lens of science wasn't just about identifying victims or perpetrators. It was about protecting history itself, about ensuring that the past wasn't corrupted or erased by those who sought to control the present. A new path beckoned, one less confined to the quiet solitude of the lab. Perhaps, I mused, there were other forgotten legacies, other anachronistic details waiting to be found, other truths demanding to be brought to light. The pursuit of justice, I now knew, was a relentless endeavor, and I was ready for it.